So today we're going to complete the setup of our RBAC implementation, and we're using some very simple roles. So we've established a class member role with a class group. That's what we did this last session. And I thought it would be good just to review RBAC essentials, role-based access control essentials, before we've actually implemented the rest. So basically, role-based access control is when you take file system objects, directories, subdirectories, files, right? And you create sensible, self-documenting file system layouts with sensible names. And what do I mean by that? I have a 465 class, the CSC 465 class. And if you're a member of the class, then good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kanisha. We were going to be performing the steps to complete the solution. And if you had a connection to your screen, you could actually perform the steps as I perform them.
I was outside, so I was using my phone.
Okay, so you can just watch for the time being.
Okay.
Ray was gonna show how he built out his directories, and that's consistent with our first step. So you have these roles that you want people to perform, and you create file system objects like FS, right? File system objects like directories and subdirectories that are named in a sensible manner to match the role, right? Named for a given purpose, a project, or a team, right? Now, in this case, we have a CSC 465 role. Members of the 465 class perform the role of being a class member. So they're members of this group, but they're also members of a campus. So you have St. Thomas students and St. Croix students, and we've created, if we had a project for our class and we had different teams on different campuses, then we'd have St. Thomas students in the St. Thomas users group, and we could say that the St. STT_users is also a role. They're team members on St. Thomas and team members on St. Croix. So by being members of the STX users group, they're basically expected, or this is structured so that they perform the role of a St. Croix user, a St. Croix team member. And when you look inside here, there are home folders or home directories for each of the user accounts. So part of RBAC is creating these sensibly named file system objects that track with or map to the roles that you've structured. Now in this role, I want to point out that when we're in the class, if we had a competition going between St. Thomas students and St. Croix students, right? Let's make this bigger so it's a little easier to see. And let's go full screen here, right? All right, so if we had St. Thomas students and St. Croix students, I've come to learn or understand that there's a kind of a natural rivalry between Thomians and Crucians. And we're going to play up on that for the purpose of this scenario. So one of the roles of St. Thomas students or users is that they're going to collaborate with each other, and we want to create this project environment so that each of them can perform their given roles and they can each contribute to their teams, and that collectively, by membership in each of the site groups or team groups, because those both belong to the class, there are some things they can do collectively as class members. So what am I saying? I'm saying that there's a role that needs to be established and then structured in terms of the data access on the class level, then on the campus level, and then inside here for each of the users, right? So when we're talking about each of the users, one of the things we want each of the users to be able to do is to put some data and resources in their given folder, and we want the other members of their team to be able to read or execute what's in their teammates' folders. But we don't want them to be able to change each other's. And the same is true here. We don't want St. Thomas students to get into St. Croix data because of the rivalry. And I'm just playing this up, right, for the purpose of illustration. We don't want Tomians to get into Crucian Kool-Aid data and resources. By the same token, the reverse is also true. We don't want Crucian students to be getting into the Tomian Kool-Aid, right? We don't want them messing with, because there's a natural rivalry. And so let's say that this is a project, a team project, and it's a contest, and the winner takes all. They go home with an A for the course. And the losers go home with an F for the course, right? So the Tomians and Crucians are kind of pitted against each other in this sort of a weird scenario. But in any case, the point is that they have roles to play. In St. Thomas, each of the students, David has data and resources that he wants Benaiah and Ray to be able to access, to read and to execute. But only David can actually change or modify what's in his directory. The same is true for Benaiah. Benaiah is the only one that can change or modify what's in his home directory or his folder, right? And the same is true of Ray. Even though David and Benaiah can see what's in Ray's folder and they can execute anything that he's created with his programming skills, they can't change anything. And by the same token, each of these three, none of them are allowed to see the St. Croix student directories. But we want a team lead to be able to put materials. So we just designated yesterday that one of the students would volunteer to be the lead, and they would take turns being the lead. And there's a role called STX lead and STT lead. One of the students at each campus is going to take turns leading as the team leader and directing traffic. And we want that team leader to be able to put things to change and modify in the STT users directory. And we want the STX, the Crucian lead, to be able to make changes and modify in the STX users directory. So what am I saying? The lead for St. Thomas yesterday or last class, David volunteered. That means David can put something in here in this open area, not inside the user directories, but inside the STT users directory, so that all of the users can access what is in the team directory. So you have a team directory where we can post data and resources. And David is going to fulfill the role as the team lead. He's the one that decides what's in there, right? So David has his own directory, but he also has the St. Thomas users folder. Who was it that volunteered for St. Croix? Wasn't it Kenesha?
Yes, Kenesha.
Okay, so Kenesha is in
Yeah, it's
charge.
me.
Yeah, Kenesha, you're the lead for, you have your own directory, your own home directory, but you also have, you're playing the role of the lead for St. Croix. So you get to decide what gets changed and modified in the Crucian directory, the STX users directory. So you play the role as the lead, and that's why you have that access. We're going to put your user account into the STX lead group and then assign the lead different permissions so that Kenesha can put things in the team folder and David can put things in the St. Thomas folder. I'm
Excuse me,
going,
Dr. Kentop, I don't,
yes,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I just have to step away for one moment.
okay, that's okay, I understand. Let us know when you come back. Okay,
While he's doing that, I've got a quick
Okay.
question, if it's okay.
yes, go ahead.
It's these two blue arrows. Do they mean anything, or should I just ignore the funny blue arrows?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's just a new icon.
Okay. Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything in particular. But I'm glad you asked that question, because when we finish configuring the resources, when we share them across the network, you're going to see a different symbolism. The icon's going to change a bit, right? So that's a good question. So just remember, everybody's in the team. As instructor, as the course instructor, the CSC 465 instructor role, there's a login called tKentop, not the administrative login I'm using now, but you're going to see that tKentop is the instructor for CSC 465. And I'm going to put myself in that role so that I can assign myself that role. The instructor gets to put things in the class directory. So there's data and resources that we stage in the class directory that everyone in the class gets to see and execute. But you're going to see in just a minute, when we set up these things, there's this matter of inheritance that can create all sorts of problems, and the role-based access control can get wonky if we don't account for those differences. What do I mean? It's easier to show you and demonstrate than to actually explain it. But if I give everyone access to see what's in the 465 directory, and inheritance is turned on when I do that, everyone in the 465 group who's a member of that group who has that role, oh, I'm in the 465 class, they're going to be able to see everything, including the other team's folder. And we just said, oh, no, that's a criteria that we don't want broken. We want to be able to, in a granular fashion, break out the different permissions so that we have absolute positive control. Inside the 465 directory, everybody that's in the class gets to see, but that's as far as it goes. That permission doesn't push down into the STT users directory so that STX users who are also members of the 465 class get into the Tomian Kool-Aid. So we have to have these boundaries, and again, it's going to be easier to see how this works once we get started. It's best for everybody to start with this view. So if you can back up to the root of your drive so that it shows your CSC 465 folder, or go into the temp folder where you set up 465. You want to see this view of your directory. And then I need everybody to tell me you're ready to go. If you're just watching what we do, like Kenesha, then just watch. Ray said he was going to step away. I don't know if he's back yet, but we're going to go ahead and continue. We want to finish before we're done. The first thing I want to do, let's pause just a second to read the rest of these things, okay? So you want to make sure, just to finish the thoughts about how, the criteria and how we structure role-based access control. We said that the groups track with the given role, and then there are sensible assignments for sensible self-documenting accounts and groups, right? I did mention this. if you want to set up a high security environment, you may not want your roles and directories to be so plainly stated. The example we're using here is a sensible arrangement where we have a class directory for class resources, campus directories for campus resources, and those are available to only members of those campus, at the campus, right? And then we have individual directories. The other thing that happens with role-based access control, there is that one exception. When it comes to the home directories, you don't do the same thing with home directories that you do in every other case for RBAC. What am I saying? You never assign permissions to file system objects based on accounts directly. You always, always, always use groups, except when you're dealing with home directories. And I'll show you what we talk about. Once all of this is established and people understand, okay, which permissions belong where, then you're in a good place to go ahead and perform your RBAC. So I'm going to jump back to my live system again. And the first thing I want to show you is how inheritance works. So inheritance for the permissions and privileges begin at the root level of the disk. And in Windows, they're pushed down into all of the directories. And then inside the subdirectories, right? And then from there, further down into the directories. So what am I saying? Let's look at the permissions here on this level at the class directory level for class members. I'm going to right click the directory and select properties, and then I'm going to go into security. And when I look at the permissions here, this is a terrible view. I'm always going to ignore this view, and I'm going to instead select advanced. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay. So this first view is really significant. I'm inheriting these default permissions for the class directory from the root of the E drive. So I set this up on the E drive on this system. And administrators have full control. The system itself has full control. So Virgo itself, the system called Virgo, my file server, my login, I'm an administrative login, I have full control. The person who created it has full control. And here's the default that's very disturbing. Role-based access control in a Windows environment is tricky because if you don't intentionally change the permissions, basically what happens is that everybody who uses a system has read and execute. What that means is that what we intend for this demonstration is barf to begin with. Crusians can get into Tomian Kool-Aid. Tomians can get into Crusian Kool-Aid because they're all users on this system. When they connect to this server to get into the project folders, they're all users on the system. And Windows basically turned up all of the rights and privileges so that everybody could see and execute anybody else's stuff. They just want it to work. This is a bad idea in terms of security. And this is why one of the things we're showcasing or playing up in such a big way is this idea of role-based access control as a best practice. We're going to remove this in a minute, and then I'm going to say okay, and you're going to see that there's an issue that kicks up because of inheritance. Because all of the permissions are identical. Let's look at the other permissions. I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to look at the permissions for the St. Thomas users, the Tomians. If I go into properties and then look at security and then look at advanced, oh look, where am I inheriting the permissions for this, for the Tomian directory? So for everybody who has the role of being a St. Thomas student, they're inheriting permissions from where? Oh, from the root of the E drive. And what are those permissions? Same as we saw at the directory up above. This is a problem, right? Let's look at this other one, the Crusions, right? If I look at the security settings that are default, oh, same junk, right? Everybody, and look at the owner, right? The owner is a special attribute, and we want to also include in our role-based access control the assignment of owners. Like, we're going to assign the team lead as the owner for that directory, and then we're going to assign change permissions or modify permissions for that directory. Let's continue. What do we see in Kenesha's? In Kenesha's folder, her directory, if we look at how the default permissions are set up, it's still the same train wreck. I don't see Kenesha listed here intentionally. I don't see the rest of her teammates listed here intentionally. All of these permissions were inherited from the root of the E drive, and they're just pushed down. Everybody in our group, anybody who's a user on Virgo, never mind who's in our class. See, people in the 444 class can look at Kenesha's directory. That's bad, right? I mean, nobody should be able to look at anybody else's stuff. Let's just be honest. Microsoft wanted everything to work out of the box. So when people create applications, hey, it all just works. The problem is that everybody is a user when they connect to that machine. Absolutely everyone. In the Linux world, that's the same as the other category for security attributes. We'll talk more about Linux in a bit. In any case, what we want to do is we want to make some changes from the top down, and we want to go about a specific method of pushing changes down and then blocking inheritance so that we can start and stop the permissions at given levels. Here's what I'm talking about. And there's one other change I need to make here. I'm going to go ahead and drop out of full screen and drop in here. Yeah, Antares, okay. I need to create a new group called CSC 465 instructor, okay? That was one thing I didn't do. And I'm going to do that right now just to make sure we have that in place. Because I need to have the role as the instructor established so I can make changes to the class folder. So I have to, sometimes when you don't have this set up right, make it universal and security. And now I'm going to establish members, and Timothy Kentop, T. Kentop, is going to be a member of this group. Okay. Now that's not the T. Christian administrative login. This is the instructor account, the instructor login, and it's literally T. Kentop. When I look at the account, it's a different account altogether, an instructor account. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the other screen and then show you these changes. And what I'd like you to do is to follow along and make the same changes, just as I do. Okay. So I'm in the 465 directory, and I want to change these properties. So I'm going to go to the security tab and then click advanced. And I'm going to get rid of this, right? I'm going to get rid of the users. And I don't like them. And as soon as I say remove, it says you can't remove because this object is inheriting permissions from its parent. The parent of the CSC 465 directory upstream is the E drive. That's its parent. That's what it means. You must prevent this object from inheriting permissions. Turn off the option for inheriting permissions. Then try removing it again. What they're saying is disable inheritance for this directory. I'm going to do that. I'm going to disable inheritance. And the moment I do, it's going to say, hey, do you want to convert permissions or do you want to remove all of them? I want to convert them because I want to work with what defaults are in here. I want administrators for the Virgo system to be able to get access to this directory in case assistance is needed or support is needed. Of course, Virgo needs to get in here in order to be able to do backups. If you run a system backup, Virgo itself needs to get in here. I designed this system. I'm the Virgo administrator, but I'm actually going to remove my account from here in just a minute because it's not a good practice to assign to direct accounts. That violates the RBAC rule that you never assign permissions based on an individual account. It's always group accounts, right? Except for home directories. So I'm going to want to pull this out. Right now, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to pull this out. And I disabled inheritance at CSC 465. And I'm going to change the owner of this at some point to CSC 465 instructor, right? And if I do the wrong thing and I check this box, what's going to happen is that it's going to push all of those changes down into the subdirectories. So I got to be thoughtful about what I'm going to do. Are there any security principles, any groups, any roles that I want to push down into all of the directories? Well, I want to add the CSC 465 group because all the students are in there. And I want the group to have read and execute permissions. And then I want the instructor to have change permissions. So I'm going to add I'm going to click modify instead. And I want you to notice it says this applies to this folder, subfolders, and files. That's going to cause a problem. If I was smart, I would say, okay, I want this change to apply only to this folder, but not to subfolders and other files. Why? Because that's going to push these changes all the way down into the other subdirectories and other contents. So let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And because this is the way it is, you're going to see some things happen. Now, if I go inside here, it says, oh, I don't have permission because I'm logged in T Christian and I just removed myself, but I am an administrator. The T Christian account that I logged in on Virgo because I'm Virgo's administrator is a member of the administrators group. So I'm going to click continue and that's going to publish a log. It's going to be published. That clicking that button is going to be logged in the system log. And that's an important security principle and safeguard. Now, I want to see what happens here. Did anything change? So I'm going to look at the properties for security. Oh, look. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
So it says allow 465 read and execute. Is that what I want though? Well, if I leave that in here, it means the members of the 465 group, including the Crusians, can read and execute. And it also means that the instructor can modify, right? And look, now I'm inheriting from where? I'm inheriting from 465, the CSC 465 directory. What I want to do is disable inheritance and change this out. So I'm going to convert. I'm going to remove myself. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to add. Well, this is the STT users directory. So who do we want to have read access? The STT users group. Now, what I'm saying is that this directory, STT users, who should have permission? STT users. Isn't that sensible? What do you think? They have read and execute inside the STT users, not STX. I removed 465 because I don't want that to push all the way down. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to add STT lead. And who's in the STT lead role?
I think it was going to be me, David.
That's right. So you're going to have, oh, wait a second, I'm going to edit this. You're going to have modify privileges. You can put stuff in that directory. Everybody else in the STT users group can read and execute, right? Everybody with me? I'm going to apply and say okay. But what about on this one? STX users. Oh, look, same thing. I want to change this, right? I'll change ownership at the very end. So when I'm finished making all the changes, I'm going to go ahead and change the ownership. I'm going to remove myself. Oh, it says it's inheriting it from its permission, from its parents. So I'm going to disable inheritance. I'm going to convert. I'm going to remove. I'm going to remove and remove. What should I put here instead of STT? What should I put here? Kenesha. What am I going to add here if I'm working with STX? Who should have read privileges for the STX users directory?
Everybody in STX should be able to read it.
That's right. STX users should be able to read what's in STX users. That's why I use the same security group and file system names. So as I'm setting this up, I can follow the logic, right? I want STX users to have, who are members of the STX users group, to have read and execute privileges to the STX users directory, the file system object. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to hit OK. So now I'm just going to double check to make sure this worked. Everybody with me? All right. So far I have my class folder set up, and it's in a good place, right? And here it says full control again. It added my name back in there. I'm going to pull that back out again. The 465 group can read and modify, but the 465, the read and execute, the 465 instructor can actually change, right? So I'm hitting apply and OK. The moment I do that and I try to go inside the other ones, it's going to fuss again. Yeah. It's going to keep adding me back in there. All right, so let's look inside the STT users. It's going to say, oh, you don't have permission. I'm going to say, okay. Let's look at David Willem's folder. Security, advanced. Okay. Do we want STT users to have read and execute privileges in David Willem's folder? What were our original specifications? We wanted STT users to be able to read and execute, but we didn't want the lead. All right, so we don't want the STT lead to be able to change in Benaya's folder. We don't want the STT lead to be able to change in Ray's folder. We want explicitly, inheritance. I'm going to remove inheritance. I'm going to convert. I'm going to remove the lead from here. And I'm going to explicitly add D. Willems. It's the only exception to the rule that you must always use groups to assign permissions. Because this is D. Willem's folder, it's his home directory. It's David Willem's home directory. He's the only one that I can directly assign by his account. So I'm going to put D. Willems, and I'm going to put modify and execute, modify and write, I'm sorry. Now, why wouldn't I put full control? This is something really important I want you to understand. Why wouldn't I put full control? If I put full control and I change ownership up here to D. Willems, and that's the last thing I'm going to do before I leave, I'm actually going to remove my name, because if I'm doing this right, I don't want David Willems to say, well, I was working on the project, but then Kentop, the system administrator on Virgo, got in there and he messed up my data. If I continue to list myself explicitly, it means that I, the admin, this admin login directly can get into David Willem's stuff because I'm a member of this group and I can noodle with his data, right? I don't want to list my name directly. It's okay if system administrators get in there, because when they click into it, it's going to say, hey, you don't have permissions. Are you sure you want to do this? And when you click yes, a log entry is written. Okay, one of the administrators got in here. And if hopefully there's a help desk log where somebody said, David said, yes, Mr. Kentop, I give you permission as the Virgo system admin to render your assistance to, because I got to get my software working right, and I need your help, and I give you permission, and then you go in there, and then your permission is your account is added, right? But my point is if I list full control here for David, David can literally delete his own home directory. If I give David Willems full permission, full control, it means that not only does he have the right to change anything inside here, he can actually delete the entire container. And we don't want that. When we're setting up user directories, we want users to be able to do anything inside the directory, but not to the container itself. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Yes.
So now I'm going to change this, and I'm going to check the box that says replace owner on subcontainers and objects. Because whenever David creates something in his directory, he's the owner of that directory, right? I want his directory to be I want his ownership to be reflected for anything he does inside here. I'm going to remove my own name, and I'm going to hit apply and OK. It says, if you have just taken ownership of this object, you will need to close and reopen this. I'm just going to say OK. The other thing I want you to understand is that when you're making changes to this, when you click OK, sometimes you have to go OK, 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 apply all the way out, OK. And then it's taken effect. If you don't click OK, OK, OK all the way until the screen clears, the change hasn't taken effect. Now, what happens if I want to go in here? Can I go inside David Willem's directory? Well, as a T Christian login, I don't have permission. I could force it by going into accounts. What's going to happen is that Ray can get in there because he's a member of the STT users group. If this were R. Mathering clicking on it, Ray could go in there and see, he could read and execute anything in D. Willem's. I'm not going to do that. But that's one sure sign that what you did is correct. Now let's look at Ray Matherin's, right? I'm going to set up Ray's the same way. I'm going to go into security. Oh, look. All the STT users can read and execute. We want to keep that. I don't want David Willem's or whoever the lead is to have modified privileges inside Ray's directory. Ray doesn't want that either. Ray wants to remove that. Oops, so the inheritance is pushing it down from the level above. I'm going to disable inheritance. I'm going to convert, and I'm going to remove the lead. I'm going to add Ray Matherin. I'm going to give him modify and write privileges. But I'm not going to give him full control because Ray could delete his own home directory if I did that. I don't want to give him administrative rights that are so high, full control, that he could whack his own home directory and ruin his own resources before the project is done, right? I'm going to go ahead and change the ownership while I'm still listed. It's going to say save changes. I'm going to list Ray Matherin. I'm going to click replace the owner so that whenever Ray creates things in Ray's directory, I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to, I could check this box and that would push everything that's here and here. And that's what I should do. I want to enforce inheritance from this point on. So I've been disabling inheritance down through the layers, but this is one case where I want to replace all child object permission entries with inheritable permissions from this object so that it forces everything that you see. Ray's ownership, his modify privileges, the STT user read and execute privileges. We want to leave that intact. So I'm going to check this box. I'm going to say apply and OK. It says this will replace explicitly defined permissions on all descendants of this object with inheritable permissions. You want to continue. Now, I didn't do that. It says you've just taken ownership. Ray just took ownership. I'm going to hit OK and OK. I want to go back into David's and I want to turn on that inheritance for David so that what's on the root level of his home folder is enforced or inherited, pushed down into any directories he creates, any subdirectories he creates. See, all of those things. He can create his own directories, subdirectories for the subdirectories, and so on. And we want these security settings to take effect no matter what David builds out in here. So I'm actually going to go inside here and go to properties and go into security. I'm going to click advanced and it's going to say, hey, you must have read permissions, and it's going to give me those permissions. I'm going to check this box. I'm going to hit apply. You don't see T Christian here. Okay. Okay. I do the same thing for Benaiah Francis, right? You're going to repeat the same process with the STX users. I'm going to go back into the St. Croix Christian, right? And I'm going to go ahead into each of these. I'm going to remove Kenesha's, the STX lead from there. I'm going to follow the same process. Does anyone have any questions about what we're doing? So in security, I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to remove the lead. Oh, it says I can't because of inheritance. I'm going to disable the inheritance, convert. I'm going to remove the lead. I'm going to add who? Who am I adding on this one? B. Francis, because it's his home directory. It's the only time I use an individual user account to assign permissions, because this thing belongs to Benaya. I'm going to apply this change just so I don't have to have that silly, I'm going to change this, Benaya Francis, right? I'm going to replace the ownership on here. I'm going to remove my own name, and I'm going to select replace all child object permission entries with inheritable permission entries from this object, meaning I'm going to force this change so that STT users, his peers, can read and execute, but they can't change anything. He can add things and change things. Anything he creates, any new directories and subdirectories, these permissions will be enforced all the way down into those. And his ownership over all of those will remain in place. That's why I'm checking both of these boxes. I'm going to hit apply. It's going to say, oh, you're replacing and you're going to force this. Do you want to continue? I'm going to say yes, okay, okay, and okay. Would anyone prefer to stay on 3 minutes longer to watch me perform the rest of the steps on the STX users?
Okay with me.
Okay.
It's okay with
I
me.
would like to, but I kind of have to go at the moment. Sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, I'll go ahead and finish the STT users. And then this next Tuesday, I want to show you what happens when we create the network permissions. Okay, so what we're doing now are NTFS file level permissions. And when we allow these resources to be available to everyone across the network, we have to set up network shares. So that's something I'm going to do on, I'm sorry, on Monday. Did I say Tuesday? Monday. So there is one more piece to this we want to finish, and we'll go ahead and share that on Monday. I'll also push back the deadlines for your submission, and we'll push back when we do the midterm, okay?
Okay.
Well, I didn't have Ray. I should have captured Ray's. I'll remember Ray to include Ray on this. All right, so I'm going to finish real quick. STT users are done. I'm going to finish STX users. All right, so I'm going to basically remove, well, actually this has been done for me. I'm going to add A. Abdelghani and add modify and write. So I want a seal to have modify, change, and write permissions to her own folder. I'm going to go ahead and apply this. And that applies to this folder, subfolders, and files. I'm going to change ownership here and give her ownership. And I'm going to replace, I'm going to check the box so that in case anything is created now or in the future, it's going to be a seal is the owner of her own, anything that's in hers, she's the owner. I'm going to remove my own name. Oh, and it's inheriting permissions. So I got to disable inheritance. I'm going to remove. And now I'm going to check this box so that STX users can read and execute anything in a SEAL's directory, but they can't change anything. Only she can change something. And she's the owner. We'll do the same thing for Amaya's. We're going to, I might as well disable inheritance. Get that out of the way. We're going to add a Saret. She's going to have modify and write privileges on her own directory. I'm going to change the ownership. Well, yeah, I can save changes and change the ownership. I'm going to replace the ownership on all containers, remove myself. So her teammates can read and execute, she can change. I'm going to select this box to turn on inheritance, so anything, directories, subdirectories, and so on. It all applies. I do the same thing for Kanisha. I'm going to disable inheritance. I'm going to add K Florence. I'm only giving an individual account permissions directly because this is K Florence's home directory. She has modified privileges. I'm going to apply this. I'm going to change the owner to K Florence. I'm going to check this box. I'm going to remove myself. I'll check this box. So Kanisha is the owner, including anything that's created in the future. And Kanisha maintains change and write privileges for anything that's created inside that container. STX users, her teammates, can read and execute. I'm going to apply. That's it. On Monday, I'll show you what we do on the network so that now that these permissions are in place, people can access this and share these things. But basically what we have now is that if I look inside here in the 465 class folder, all members of the class have the ability to read and execute anything that's placed inside the class folder, but just inside the class folder. If something is placed inside the site or campus folder, only people inside the site or campus can see it. If somebody puts something inside the user folders, the users put something in their own folders, their teammates can view it, but they can't change it, which means they can develop and contribute. They have total control over their own real estate. Others can view and execute so that people can try things to see if it works, and they can collaborate without having to share all these things among each other, right? But the point is that, all right, so on this level, the instructor can put stuff in there. The instructor can modify. You see here that the owner is T. Christian. I should probably change that to be the 465 instructor. And I should probably pull myself out of here. I won't check this box because if I check this box after making that change, What you see here is going to push into the team folders and into each individual's folder. And all of the entries for the team settings and the individual settings will be gone. So I have to be very careful about how I check this box. But it's okay to do this. And when I change this, right? So let's do that. I'm going to change, I'm going to put in CSC underscore 465 underscore instructor. I'm not going to check this box because I don't want the 465 instructor to become the owner of everything in the team sites and everything in the individual student sites. So I will not check it, but I will remove this and I will not check that because I want the instructor to continue to have modify within, but not all the way down. I'm going to apply. We're going to say okay and okay and okay. The $64,000 question is whether or not those changes pushed all the way down into the other directories. I clicked in here to view it, but you see users still have read and execute. I want the lead, STX lead, to have this. Let me see what happens down here. So the owner is going to change STX lead. I'm not going to check this box because I don't want the STX lead to be the owner of all of the student directories. I'm going to remove this again. I'm going to add STX lead. I'm going to put modify. So within this directory, the lead can put stuff in there for the site, for the campus. The users can read and execute it. The lead is the owner. I don't want to check either box because I don't want this to push into the individual directories. I'm going to do the same thing over here for the STTs. This is just, I'm just mopping up. I'm going to change this to STT lead. I'm not going to check the box. I'm going to remove myself. That was one step I forgot on the SDX side. You see lead is already in here for modify. But I'm not going to check the box. I'm not going to check the box because I don't want the lead to be the owner. And I don't want this to push down into the individual students on the STT site. I'll click OK and OK and OK. So if I go inside here, because I want to see what's inside for the users. Actually, what would happen is, let's look at Benaya's. Okay. So you see Benaya has retained ownership, he's retained modify, and his teammates continue to have read and execute. So that's all good. I'm just going to cancel out of this. Nothing changed, it didn't propagate because I didn't turn on inheritance at a certain point. But I did turn on inheritance to ensure that from that point on, anything in Ray's directory, Ray owns and Ray can change. His teammates can view it. Anything that's also the same for David and Benaya. Any questions? So that what we've done is completed the role-based access control for the NTFS level file system permissions. On Monday, we'll review the network share permissions so that people can access this across the network. I need you to finish and perform what I just did on each of your systems, and I'd like for you to be able to open and show the properties and the settings in each of yours. And then after we do that first thing Monday, we'll set up the network connections, okay?
Okay.
Any questions before we end our session? All right,
No.
we're going to stop the share. I'm going to push this out to the resources folder so that you can reference this over the weekend, and you can set up the permissions and privileges on each of your levels, on each of the levels. Don't forget to go back to the course directory and the campus directories to mop up after you finish doing all the others. If you do those setting changes early in the process before you finish the user directories, you get all sorts of weird error messages and it gets crazy. So you should follow the process that I showed you. And you do have to cycle back to take care of 465 level and the campus levels, those final changes.